B'ruchim habayim, ladies and gentlemen. Ub'Shem Hashem na'aseh v'natzliach. With Hashem's help, we will do and we will succeed. I hope everybody is doing well today or this evening if you're here in Israel. Now we have a ceasefire today, which so far it's holding up, but only time will tell. I'm making this video because a lot of people ask me, or at least when they find out that I'm a convert, they ask me about why I converted. They ask me different questions, the 21 questions when somebody finds out. This is something that every convert knows about. That's why many people are really nervous to speak about their family background, because their family background or where they come from, where they were raised, is like a dead giveaway that that you're not religious, or you did not grow, or that you did not grow up religious or even Jewish. So I always get the question, oh, and how long have you been frum, and stuff like that. So I wanted to answer all the questions that were related basically to my conversion story, and I also wanted to share with it my Aliyah story, because I feel like they're both intertwined, even though I made Aliyah like a year and a half after I converted. So I'm gonna basically speak about everything in a chronological order. So my background before I became religious minded, before I converted, I was born in West Palm Beach, Florida, in 1992, and I grew up in a town north of Atlanta, Georgia, called Dawsonville. Now it's part of the metro Atlanta area, but when I was growing up, it wasn't, and the population was half of its size. I grew up actually outside of Dawsonville, right on the county line, right on the Pickens County line, about a 30-minute drive away from Amicalola Falls and the start of the Appalachian Trail that goes all the way up to Maine. So I grew up as an Appalachian boy. I did not grow up religious. My first religious experience was from my great-grandmother, may God rest her soul. I got my experience with her when I was about 6 or 7 years old. When I went to her church, she was a Southern Baptist, and her church was really, really small. I think they would have like a maximum of 10, 15 people. And they were the type of Southern Baptists that would praise the J-Man and then eat fried chicken on a Sunday evening. And at the time, she lived in a place called Hazelhurst in South Georgia in the county of Jeff Davis, which tells you how southern that county is. So that was my very first experience. So my father, grew up loosely Southern Baptist, and my mother grew up Catholic. My parents divorced when I was around 4 or 5 years old. And after that was when me, my mother, and my stepfather moved up to Georgia. So yeah, growing up as a kid, I spent a lot of time playing video games because I had a very tumultuous relationship with my mother and my stepfather. And also I got bullied a lot in school, so I felt like I had nobody to turn to. So just like many people with social issues and lack of friends, I basically became like a hermit with my video games. And I was playing, games like Madden, Call of Duty, Halo, and of course my favorite game series of all time, Assassin's Creed, because I am a big history buff. But I also did sports. I did park and recreation baseball in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade as an outfielder. And because I grew up near the Atlanta area, I was a big Braves fan. I also did a year of American football, and I also did two years around in both winter, fall USA wrestling, and also summer camps. I did wrestling for that, and it was actually because I wanted to become an MMA fighter. There were two things that I wanted to do when I was in high school. I wanted to, either become a world history teacher and a wrestling coach, or I wanted to become a professional MMA fighter. And of course, back then I had a lot of difficulties with goal setting, as well as confidence issues, and having undiagnosed issues like ADHD and such. So that only compounded my issues as a kid. So at 19 years old, I moved up to Nashville, Tennessee. When I was 19 years old, and because my father had already lived up there, and I loved Nashville. Just before the time that I moved up there was when I became more religiously minded. So I started going to non-denominational places, but it just didn't. I didn't fit. It wasn't so much that I didn't fit in. It's just that I was looking for something, theologically more sound. I wanted something much more, and it all came from the question that many teenagers ask themselves and everybody else: what's the purpose of living? Why are we here on this earth? For some people, they end up becoming atheists, but for me, it was the opposite. I I said there has to be more to life than just living for ourselves, just living for pleasures, just chasing money and such. And I went to public school, so um, I was no stranger to the degenerate culture of then, which unfortunately has gotten exponentially worse in the last 20 years. Um, but a lot of those things, and just the general unhappiness in life, not really having goals in life, not really having, putting so much energy into a higher power. So that was when I started becoming religious, first through a non-denominational, and then I gradually started becoming much more religious through the Catholic Church, because it was my mother's faith. Um, and I became religious. I prayed the rosary pretty much every day and such, and I even had like a homemade shrine of Yushka, Mary, and different things, and I was trying really hard to get close to Hashem, but it's for some reason, something just felt off. Something felt completely off, actually. Um, and I started thinking I need to really find something that's going to really get me closer to Hashem. I need to really find the emet, the truth. Um, and I'd always been interested in Judaism, because we're always taught that Judaism obviously came before Christianity, that Christianity is an offshoot of Judaism. And growing up, from my great grandmother, she always said that the Jews are God's chosen people. And excuse me, that if we were God's chosen people, why aren't we all trying to convert to Judaism? Why isn't everybody Jewish? Excuse me. Um, and I learned from my mother about, that Jews don't eat pork, Jews don't believe in Yushka, Jews like money. Um, she had she brought out some negative stereotypes of Jews, which I will get into when speaking about finishing conversion. But in 2013, after a few years living in Nashville, excuse me, I finally decided to go to an Orthodox synagogue. I did not go conservative, and I did not go reform, because I knew that that they were not they were not exactly holding by the words of the Torah. So I was much more socially conservative minded. I wanted to get to what was more authentic, and and excuse me, and I went to an Orthodox synagogue in Nashville, and it was actually, ironically enough, the same Orthodox synagogue that I went to all the way up until the time that I made Aliyah. Um, I had no interest in wanting to convert to Judaism at first. I just wanted to learn. I wanted to learn exactly what Jews think, what they expect in a Messiah, what they practice, why they practice these different things, as a way of getting to know Jews. So Jews, God's supposed chosen people. I wanted to get to know more, but to also at the same time dispel many of the anti-Semitic things that I've heard about Jews and all the negative stereotypes and such. So it was during that time of going to a synagogue for a year. I went to many different, Shabbatot prayers. I went to many of the Shacharit morning prayers on Shabbat morning, and became friendly with some of the people within the community. And it was after a year in 2014 that, after really reflecting and finally coming to the conclusion that the J-Man, or Yashka, was not only a false messiah, but he is just one person in a long list of false messiahs. And because he was the most influential, his ideology became the most dangerous, as we've seen from the situation of the Christians in Europe all the way to the present day. So after coming to that conclusion, I asked myself, do I want to follow the 7 laws of Noah, or do I want to live as a religious Jew? Do I want to live as a Torah observant Jew? And I was toiling with this question for several months, really intensely. It was occupying my mind the whole time, at work, everything. Like, even when I was in the middle of doing physical stuff, it was always on my mind. And I finally came to the conclusion that I wanted to live as a religious Jew. I wanted to have more kedusha, to have more holiness in my life, but to also have another opportunity to serve Hashem. And what better way to serve Hashem than by living the mitzvot? Especially, obviously there are many mitzvot for women, but all of the mitzvot for men, the mitzvot aseh shezman grama, the time-bound mitzvot, which do not apply to women but only for men, it's something, it's just another opportunity to sanctify Hashem's name. So that's when I decided I wanted to convert. So I did my conversion through a private Beit Din in Nashville. It took almost 2 years, and I wanted to do it through the RCA. For those that don't know, it's the Rabbinical Council of America. It's the largest Orthodox organization in America, and especially in terms of Batei Din. And also the RCA is recognized by the Israeli rabbinate. So it was either that or the CRC, which is the Chicago Rabbinical Council. And the CRC, their Beit Din is also recognized by the Israeli rabbinate, but also they are a really good heksher when it comes to kosher food. Really, really good. But the Rav of the synagogue, who was also part of my Beit Din, he did not want to go through the RCA. He said, if you want to go through the RCA, I'm not going to help you there. He was very much against the RCA because he looked at the same way that he looked at the rabbinate as power grabbing and corrupt. and such. And unfortunately, there are certain aspects of corruption within both institutions. But the problem is the organization in yeshiva that this particular Rav went to. He went to Yeshivat Chovavei Torah, which is founded by Avi Weiss, and they are very known for being much more open to LGBTQ plus members, but also even doing conversions for LGBTQ people. And also they're becoming more supportive of ordaining women as Orthodox rabbis. Of course, they have the title Rabbah, but it's getting to such a point now that that particular institution, that particular strand of open, quote unquote, liberal Orthodox or open Orthodox, it's being compared to the conservative movement of 60 years ago. And of course, the conservatives are now considered reform according to religious Jews of Yirat Shamayim. So I went through the private Beit Din because it was the only option that I had that I was financially able to afford, because I was going through a transition in my job. I went from washing cars to working as an electrician for an electric company, and I did really well. But I don't know if I would have been able to afford the time off to visit the Beit Din, whether it was in Houston or in Atlanta or New York or even Miami, because I was already using all of my vacation days for the holidays. So I had to work with what I had. So a question that I always get asked by people that are interested in converting, or people that were born religious, they ask me what are some of the most difficult aspects about going through a conversion process, and if I ever thought about quitting. The most difficult thing about going through the conversion process is just having patience, which is actually something that you really have to work towards. It's actually something that all Jews are supposed to work on in terms of, limud Torah, but even, what we study, musar, ethics. That's one of the aspects is dealing with patience. I know there are many people that would rather get a quick conversion just to say, that they're Jewish and such, so they'll go to a reform or a conservative conversion, which is basically like eating a nothing burger. Or they will go to people. There's a particular guy, he himself is a convert, but he behaves more like a Christian than he does a Jew. He does these once a month conversions on the beach in Miami. Rav Yaron Reuven Sheikhye of the organization Bezrat Hashem spoke out against him many times. But yeah, he does these conversions on the beach, which of course are not recognized by any group. I mean, this particular person believes that Jews should not only proselytize, not only should be open to having new members of the Kehillah, but to also openly, actively proselytize. And that's something that that the modern Gedolim, the modern Torah sages of Israel, have spoken out against, or go against, especially post the founding of the modern state of Israel. Another difficult thing is being able to afford to move into the Jewish community. For some people that know, especially some people that are in the middle of the conversion process, it is expensive living inside of a Jewish community, even in a cheaper city like, for example, Memphis. Of course, Memphis has a lot of high crime, and of course, high crime places are typically cheaper, but in the Jewish area, it's much more expensive. But I never thought about quitting my conversion, especially because it took me as long as it did to decide that I want to become a Jew. I did not think about quitting. In fact, even during, personal transitions, and such, and professions and such, and the headache that went along with that, many people, a lot of people would completely, a lot of people would quit their conversion process, but if anything, it did not deter me at all. I was so motivated, and my motivation to become a religious Jew was, it was something that was never ending. Um, so yeah, and the easiest thing for me was to integrate myself into the community. I became a bit more social, and I started to really get to know people within the community. And also, I would always try to show up for, mincha and arvit prayers after work, and I would try to go to different events and such. Um, I mean, and getting back to the patience thing, the thing that can really drive a person crazy, um, is, the whole, turning somebody away 3 times. It definitely happens, but it's not something that's explicit. You'll get a lot of cold shoulder through pretty much the entire process. It's not one of those, okay, after 3 times I'll accept you and I'll train you. You go through periods of where the Rav will speak to you or teach you about different things, and then there are times when the Rav will simply, delay answering you or such. So it might seem like he's being a jerk, or or that you're not important. It might seem like that, but he may just be testing you. That's how I felt. It sometimes felt frustrating, but I reminded myself, he's most likely just testing me. Be patient, Tuvia. So yeah. So when I finished my conversion, I finished in 2015, a week before Rosh Hashanah. So it was really awesome getting to go into the new year as a new Jew, a complete spiritual rebirth. It felt amazing. I know a lot of people, they have this, there are many people that have this thing where they accomplish this thing of becoming a Jew, and then it's like a honeymoon phase or like a celebration phase, and then after a little while, it almost feels like the hangover phase or the post-party phase where you just kind of get tired and puckered out and such. But for me, it was not. It was actually the opposite. Being Jewish, officially being able to be counted in a minyan, and getting to gradually learn more things, made me so excited. So when I converted, of course, I lived in an Ashkenazi community. There were no Sephardic synagogues in Nashville, Tennessee. I mean, in Nashville, Tennessee. So I had no choice but in the community to follow the Ashkenazi minhag. But in my mind, when I was converted, I always told myself I want to eventually follow the Sephardi minhag. And the reason that I wanted to follow the Sephardi minhag is because my next goal was to move to Israel. And I believe, just as Rav Ovadia Yosef, Zichrono Levacha, that the Maran Shulchan Aruch is binding upon all Jews in Eretz Yisrael, because the Gdolim, the sages in Eretz Yisrael at that time, they all recognized the authority of Rabbi Yosef Karo, of the Maran Shulchan Aruch. And of course, for Sfaradim, this is something that we lean heavily into, the Maran Shulchan Aruch, and of course the Ashkenazim lean into the Ramah, which is basically just an added addition to the Shulchan Aruch, basically adding the Ashkenazi minhagim. So they rely on the Ramah or the Mishnah Berurah. But I knew that I eventually wanted to move to Israel, and I wanted to keep the Sephardic minhag. And Baruch Hashem, now I'm able to keep the Sephardic minhag with no complications whatsoever, including wearing tefillin Rabbeinu Tam. And yes, I do wake up for slichot a month before Yom Kippur. So yeah, and then after I was eligible to make Aliyah, I don't know if the rule has changed, but when I was making Aliyah, one of the main guidelines was to that people that converted 8 months after their conversion, they would be eligible to make Aliyah. And I went through the process, and I got my first taste of Israeli bureaucracy, because in America you don't need to submit so many papers and forms and such, and I was overwhelmed. I was like, oh my God, this is a lot of stuff to fill out. And in America, and most things in America, you don't have to fill out nearly as much. There's not as much red tape on things related to business or bureaucracy. There's less bureaucracy in much of America than in Israel, but of course that depends on if you live in a state like Tennessee, which conservative states typically, red states typically have less bureaucracy, while the solid blue states like New York and California especially have a lot more bureaucracy. During my Aliyah process, I decided to go on a birthright trip. And of course, coming to Israel, actually experiencing the land for the first time, I did a birthright trip just to make sure I wanted to come to Israel. And being in Eretz HaKodesh, in the Holy Land, where all of our ancestors came, and the same land that Hashem promised, that promised our people. So that was an awesome experience, and it only motivated me to make Aliyah. And the reason I wanted to make Aliyah is because I wanted to live in a land that was, I wanted to live in a place with a lot of holiness, where it's easier to live as a Jew. Not just that, but as a religious Jew, because in Nashville, it was not easy living as a religious Jew. There were not a lot of kosher restaurants, definitely not a lot of people to study Torah with, which was super important for me. Now, of course, it's a lot easier to find people to study with. I wanted to study with the Rav, even after conversion and such, but of course, being a pulpit Rav, they typically don't have time to study with individual people. They're busy with the community and such, and doing communal things. They're not like a Rosh Yeshiva. So that's what I wanted to move here, but also because in Nashville I would not be able to find a wife. And if I did, I would have to make a lot of sacrifices in terms of, on the religious grounds and such, because there were more conservative, Reform, and secular Jews than there were religious Jews. And New York was definitely out of the possibility. I did not want to live in a super expensive place like New York. I mean, don't get me wrong, Israel's expensive, but it's the Holy Land, but also my quality of life is much, much better than it would be in a place like New York. So I felt like if I stayed in America, I would have to risk my religious integrity, the religious integrity that I worked so hard to get, and that was just not on the table for me. I was worried that I would not get approved to make Aliyah. mainly because I did my conversion through a private Beit Din. But I remember I was in Planet Fitness doing a workout, and I got a notification, an email from the from Nefesh B'Nefesh, from the Jewish agency, and it said that I was approved to make Aliyah. I was wicked excited. I was beyond excited as could be. Now, I made Aliyah in late April of 2017. So it was about a few months after Trump was inaugurated as president. I lived through 8 years of Barack Obama and his nonsense, so I didn't get to enjoy all the fun and circus fallout from Trump's presidency. But I was super excited to become an Israeli, although it was very difficult with the language barrier, trying to find my way around, trying to know how things work. There were definitely a lot of struggles, especially because I made Aliyah by myself. I had obviously no family whatsoever. So my family thought that I was crazy for making Aliyah, which if I were in their shoes, I would too. It's one thing to convert to Judaism and your parents say, he's just going through some religious phase, he'll grow out of it. It's another thing to talk about immigrating to Israel, and they're like, yeah, okay. But as that date gets closer, they realize, oh my God, he's serious. He's out of his mind. He's going to die over there. It's nothing but terrorism, because just like many Americans, they only know about Israel from what they see on television. So that was definitely difficult. When I first arrived, I was in the Merkaz Klita. I did an ulpan. I did 2 ulpanim, actually, within the first 10, 11 months. And at the same time, I opened up a file with the Rabbanut just to get my conversion status, any safek, any doubt or anything washed away. I wanted to, because I wanted to really start shidduchim, and of course it would be problematic if my Jewish status was in question. So it was something I wanted to take care of while I was still fresh. So I opened up a file with the Rabbanut through an organization called Itim, run by Rav Seth Farber. I met him several times, really nice guy. I know that they can be a bit liberal in their orientation and such, but at the same time, if you're an English speaker, and you need somebody to help you navigate the the Rabbanut bureaucracy, E-Team is the perfect place to go. So I opened up a file with the Rabbanut, and it took 6 months to get everything settled. I provided multiple letters of sources, multiple source letters from rabbis that I knew in America, and including rabbis that I met and became close to here in Israel. So they decided, oh, we're still, with your references and such, we're still not sure, so we're going to have you do what's called the Hadafat Dembrit, which you basically go back into the mikveh for a dunk, without a bracha, without a blessing. It's a way of removing any doubt whatsoever as to your conversion. And after that, I got a certificate in Ishur Giyur from the Rabbanut, so I'm recognized as a Jew by the religious establishment here in Israel. And it was shortly after that I met my Rav Shalom Miller, Aleva Shalom. He was an American Rav, and he had his own little yeshiva program called O Shel Adam, and he was living in Yeshuv Adam, north of Jerusalem, which is officially called Giva Binyamin. I met him through the rabbi and founder of the Heritage House, Rabbi Ben Pacher Sheikhia. If any of you ever have the opportunity to meet Ben Packer, he is an absolutely amazing individual to know. Really proud Jew, and he definitely has a bigger heart than a lion, especially for each Jew. So I was studying there while I was applying to do my first degree at Bar Ilan University. And I never studied in America because I never had the opportunity. And also, my grades in high school were not the best. And my SAT scores were not exactly the best either. So I was doing that. I was trying to get into university while I was studying in the mornings and working at a hostel in Jerusalem, which after having 3 jobs total here in Israel, that was definitely the worst and the most physically demanding, especially because all of my coworkers were Arabs and they were Palestinians, and of course I was less suspicious of them back then, and I was still suspicious, but also the thing that I did not like was the manager was he was smoking illegal drugs in the kitchen, and the Arab workers were smoking cigarettes in the kitchen while they were working. So I was dealing with a bit of a hostile working environment, but because my language was not the best, I did not have anywhere else to go, so I had to basically eat poop. So while I was at O Shel Adam, I got my first experience with group Gemara learning, and we started studying Masechet Kiddushin, and that's when I learned about mitzvot that says Shazman Grama, and the halacha of a man cutting off his beard, especially with a razor. Of course, in the halacha, a man is not allowed to do it, but a woman is able to do it for the man, according to the Gemara. And also Rav Shalom, he was the one that taught me about the zmanim of tefillah and such, which is something that my Rav in America did not teach me. They would tell me a time for tefillah, and I would just go. So I learned a lot, and he taught me that. He taught me my intro to the gematria. It made my learning that much better, and it made me keeping the mitzvot and keeping the zmanim and the tefillot much, much better. And together, he and we had our one-on-one. We learned a bit of Mishnayot. We did all of Mishnah Brachot, all of the laws of blessings. And we especially studied the introduction to the Mishnah, or in Hebrew, Hakdama lePirush Mishnah by the Rambam. And he and we just had such a connection, and his youthful spirit, he was so amazing. And I learned so many things about the basic mitzvot from learning under Rav Shalom. And eventually the time came, I was accepted into Bar Ilan, and the time came for me to move to the dorms at Bar Ilan University, and I started my bachelor's degree, a double major in communication and English literature. So I lived there, but I always stayed in contact with my rabbi. I had an adopted family that I had known actually since America. They were doing a Shabbaton. They were taking a year off and living in Nashville, and then returned in the August of the year that I made Aliyah. And I'm actually still in contact with them because my parents did not come to the wedding, for example. My adopted mother walked with my wife, with my bride, and my adopted father walked with me to the chuppah. But I'll get to the wedding in a bit. So I always went to them. I always had a place. I was struggling to fit in because Bar Ilan, being located in the Barkaz, it's a much more liberal environment than Jerusalem, and especially a yeshuv like Or Shaladam. So it was really difficult. So I was studying a lot, doing a double major, and I still traveled to Jerusalem to work in the Akhsanya. I used to take the bus line 400 there, the first bus every morning, and I used to work like a dog, and I would still need to muster up enough energy to study. But during this time also was when I tried really hard to get into Shidduchim. It was so difficult doing Shidduchim, excuse me, it was so difficult doing Shidduchim, especially as a convert, but also as somebody that, has some socially awkward issues dealing with undiagnosed ADHD, but also because of my conservative values. Because in an English-speaking world, especially those around, around Givat Shmuel, it's not they don't care so much about the converting. It's just that many of them come from the cosmopolitan or the yeshiva university style parts of New York City where they're more liberal and they're dressed less modest and such. And I actually tried going on dates many times, and many times it just did not succeed, and it was making me wicked depressed. So one time, it was actually during Corona, which I used this opportunity to deal with my depression and to find a new job and to find more time to study Torah. But after a while, I decided to completely stop dating English speakers because I was just not having any luck. Either the liberal religious Jewish women did not want me because I was too liberal and I was socially awkward, and my personality, they did not like it, or the more religious women didn't like me as much or didn't want me because I am a convert, or because I keep the Sephardic minhag, or just a litany of different issues. But once I stopped dating English speakers and I went straight into Israeli dating, even with my limited Hebrew, that was when I started seeing immediate success. And I actually met my wife through a shidduch initiative called Shegririm Balev, or in English, Ambassadors at Heart, which has a partnership, I believe, with the Mizrahi movement, but especially with Machon Lev, the Jerusalem Institute of Technology. It's a shidduch initiative that utilizes AI to find your match. And when I met her, it went so much, I was super nervous, and I became super pessimistic in dating and in my chances, because for me in dating, a woman will always say, "Oh, I had such a great time," and they act like they're interested, but then 15 minutes later, they would say, "Yeah, it was so nice to meet you, and I'm thinking about it. It's just not metim. It's just not going to work out. I wish you the best of luck, or batzlacha." And many men in dating know this, and even some women. It's super annoying. Jewish dating, especially religious Jewish dating, is absolute hell. But when I met my wife, she actually, my wife is inside my apartment right now. Our apartment, never mind. But she was not interested in dating. She wanted to take a break from dating. It's like, I just had a lot of unsuccessful dates. I just want to take a break. And her shadchan, her matchmaker, or not so much matchmaker, but her ambassador, shegrir, which is, you have a shegrir, which is somebody that you know. So her shegrir, her ambassador, was able to convince her to go on a date. I saw her information. I saw that she came from a very religious family, that she was from Kiryat Arba, and, of course, coming from a place, a Kahanist stronghold, a very nationalist stronghold. I was like, oh, this is interesting. And I saw that my wife was tall also, and I was like, oh, that's really good. And I saw that she was Sfaradi, and I was like, this is too good to be true. So we met at Independence Park in Gan Hatzmaut, actually right across the street from the hostel that I worked in. And it went really well. We actually spoke, most of our conversation was in Hebrew, and it did not bother her that I was a convert, even though it was relatively new for her, because she never went on any shidduchim, not really any shidduchim with converts, but it was also a slight cultural shock, because I'm very, in many ways, I'm very American, especially when it comes to American manners of not talking on the phone loudly in public or constantly honking your horn, or just common courtesy of not leaving all the lights on or being so loud when somebody's sleeping, just different things like that. And after each date that we went on, I asked her if she was interested in seeing me again, and she said very calmly, with a smile, she said, yeah. And eventually I met her father. So her father is a rabbi, and she comes from a family of rabbis. Her grandparents on her father's side are from Morocco, and her grandparents on her mother's side are from Uzbekistan. And it's a really nice mix. I always say good food with hot heads, because Moroccans have a reputation, just like Italian Americans and Cubans, of being hot-headed. So when I heard about them being hotheads, I was laughing, because, growing up in the Italian culture that my mother grew up in, and watching mafia shows like The Sopranos, I was really well acquainted with the Italian hothead, so I started laughing. But after a while, it started really going well, and we ended up getting engaged, and we ended up getting married, and it was a total of like 4.5 months. And by the way, I'm a huge fan of shidduch dating, and I'm not a huge fan of dating for a year, which is what you see in the modern Orthodox community, because if you decide that it's not going to work out, that's a year that you will never get back. So we got married in Jerusalem, and the officiating Rav was Rav Dov Lior, he's still considered the chief rabbi of Kiryat Arba, but he's very big in the religious Zionist circles, and he's also the spiritual rabbi of the Otzma Yehudit party, which is headed by Itamar Ben Gvir, who I always see in Kiryat Arba. So we got married, and now we live in Alon Shvut in Gush Etzion. I'm working as a teacher for the education ministry, and my wife is also a teacher. She's a music teacher, and we now have 2 kids, a boy and a girl, Baruch Hashem, and a nice apartment. We're trying to save up for a house, and we still deal with those culture shocks. And it took a while for her to really understand me and where I came from, because I obviously did not come from New York. So I'm a different style of Jew, but also a different mentality, because in the South and especially the countryside, the mentality is different than the city. But the good thing is that we have a really good Sephardic household. They say that the first year of marriage is always the most difficult, but my Rav Shalom, Alav Shalom, always said, he said that for him and his Rabbanit, it took them 10 years, because the first year of marriage many times takes longer than a year to really get to know each other. Jewish marriage, it's not like what you see in Western movies, where it's love at first sight, or the love comes first, and then when that love fades, that's why divorce rates are so high. In religious matchmaking, it's about compatibility. Can you see yourself living with this person? Can you see yourself building a family can you see yourself being able to work through difficulties through? That comes first, and that love comes over time, which makes a relationship much stronger. So for me and my wife, of course, the thing that helps us out a lot is having communication. Now, of course, the different behavioral things and, tied to, Israeli and American cultural differences, that sometimes hits ahead. But at the same time, what brings us together is our strong love for each other, which is only getting stronger and stronger. But also our limud Torah together is something that I highly recommend every zug, every couple to do. So looking back from the time that I started to convert to the time I finished my conversion, and this year it's my 10-year anniversary of being a Jew, I've become a lot stronger in my Yadut, or my Yiddishkeit, as the as the English speakers would say. It's a lot stronger in that as my Hebrew slowly gets better, I'm able to study much more in Hebrew, and the more I know, the more I realize how much I don't know, and the more motivation it gives me to study. And for religious Jews that do conversions, there are many times we know more than the average Jew. And then if you're going through a strict Beit Din, when you finish, you're almost like a mini rabbi. So my Torah study schedule, 2 evenings a week, when I'm not busy with teaching in the school, I learn in the evenings at Machon Meir under Rav Yisrael Cohen. He's my personal Rav in terms of Musar Rav. But when I have the opportunity, I also learn at the Beit Midrash Sfaradi. So the Rosh Yeshiva is Rav Shlomo Katzin, but I learned under his son, Rav Ezra Katzin. They're both English speakers. And the Beit Midrash used to be located in the old city next to Eish HaTorah in the Kotel Yeshiva in Porat Yosef, but it just recently, as of the Ben Azmanim, last year, between Rosh Hashanah and Sukkot, they relocated to Ramot, which is in northern Jerusalem. So when I have the opportunity, I go there in order to study. So I'm studying the Tul and the Beit Yosef, but I also study the Shulchan Aruch and the Mishnah Berurah, because I want to set myself up for eventually studying Smicha, to study for Rabbanut. I want to be able to study to become a Rav. And for me, if I don't have my own community, I want to at least be a Rav for my own family, because I expect, me and my wife want to have more than 2 children, of course. We want to have many children and dozens of grandchildren. And as the patriarch and matriarch of our family, we want to give our offspring, a solid Torah foundation. I want to leave my children with something behind, something that I did not have growing up. But if I have my own community, I want something small, something, a niche for Sfaradim, but also English-speaking Sfaradim. Now, if that's one of the reasons that I decided to make this YouTube channel, is to have my own niche, but to start as somebody that's not a Rav yet, but is merely a Talmid, not a Rav or a Talmid Chacham, as our Gedolim are called. So some people ask, your Sfaradi, which Posek, who is your Posek? Because among the Sfaradim, there are Sfaradim that hold by Rav Mordechai Eliyahu, which is based, is very Kabbalistically inspired, influenced, of course, by the Ben Ish Chai. And then there's, of course, Rav Ovadia Yosef, Zichrono Livracha, who holds closer to Maran HaShulchan Aruch. So I hold according to Rav Ovadia, and so does my wife. My wife comes from a family where they hold the minhagim of Rav Mashash, or the Rabbanim of Morocco, which includes not eating kitniot on Pesach. In our house, we do. According to Rav Ovadia, it is completely permitted. So, as Rav Yoon Reuven Sheikhia said, a person ideally should have 3 rabbis: a posek, a community Rav that you can ask questions, and a Rav Mechazek, a Rav that knows you personally, like knows you very, very well, that knows if you are really trying to be religious, or if you are an Amaretz, an ignoramus, or a complete Rasha, pretending to be a tzaddik. So my posek is Rav Ovadia. As a community Rav, I consider, because I live in Alon Shvut, and the Rav of Gush Etzion is considered Rav Yosef Rimon, I go to him when it comes to basic questions of halacha. My Rav Mechazek, I have 2 of them. One for specifically Sephardic halacha, which is Rav Ezra Katzin, and the other one is for Musar, and that is where I go to Rav Yisrael Cohen. And it's easy to speak with Rav Yisrael Cohen because he's really soft-spoken, really understanding, but it's also he's really friendly and very polite in a very British way, which he and I get along so well, and it's easy for me to understand some of the slang that he uses from my years of watching British Dragon's Den. So I go to those rabbanim, but I also listen to rabbis in Hebrew. I listen to our Rishon LeZion, the chief rabbi of Israel, Rav David Yosef, and also Rav Yitzchak Yosef. I read their weekly shiurim, their weekly Torah portions, which they also print in Hebrew. You can get those. I forget where you can find the shiurim of Rav David Yosef, but you can find the shiurim of Rav Yitzchak Yosef by going to Halacha Yomit. If you search on Google Halacha Yomit, it should be the first website, and it's the Halacha Yomit that holds according to Rav Ovadia, and you'll go under weekly shiurim of Rav Yitzchak Yosef Shlita, and every week, every Friday morning, they have it posted. So I listen to them. My wife likes to listen to Rav Eyal Amrami, who speaks a lot about Emunah V'Tachon, which is dealing with faith and trust in Hashem. And this is something that we study. And so aside from studying the Tul, the Shulchan Aruch, and Sephardic halachot, I like to study Chazon Ovadia more than I like to study Yalkut Yosef, because Yalkut Yosef, Rav Yitzchak Yosef Sheikhie, of course, he adds more things to it, and he, in some ways, changes his father's rulings to make them his own rulings. And there are times when he's more machmir, or he rules differently than his father, which, of course, as time goes on and technology and situations change, of course, the Gdolei Yisrael have to adapt. So I hold according to Rav Ovadia. So although I do like to look in Rav Yitzchak, I love to listen to Rav Yoon Reuven. He was the one that really taught me about Yirat Shamayim, he's the one that taught me, which actually is according to Rashid Chochmah, and of course Sichot Aran, which was compiled by Rabbi Nachman of Breslev's closest Talmid, Rabbi Natan, that the thing that comes first, before knowledge comes first, and before anything, comes Yirat Shamayim. And not only Yirat Shamayim, which means fear of heaven, but Yirat HaOnesh, the fear of punishment, comes before love of Hashem. And this is for people that are secular or people that are historically or politically minded, they'll recall that Machiavelli says the exact same thing, that ideally a leader wants to be both feared and loved, but you have more security in being feared, because while you cannot make people love you and that love eventually goes away, you can make people fear you. So when teaching people, you have to teach the fear of punishment first, and then you teach them the reward, and you teach them the Ahavat Hashem, the love of Hashem, and such. So I learned a lot of that from Rav Yohan, but I also learned the basics about Emunah Bitachon by Rav Yohan, because he did a whole series called Jewish Hashkafa, which was based on the work of the Chazon Ish. He wrote Sefer Chazon Ish, which is about Emunah Bitachon. So he's doing that, but he's also doing a series right now about Chassidut, based on the works of Rabbi Eli Melech Melazhinsk, especially the book Tzeitil Katan. So he's taught me a lot about these different things, and I wouldn't say that I keep in touch with him regularly, but I do when I have a really curious question about something or I want to pick his brain. I will ask him, and I usually get a response within an hour and a half. Really simple answer. But I also help him distribute books and do kiruv stuff within my my community. And for those that are in America, I might as well plug his website. Go to BHQuv, Bezat Hashem. First, go on Bezat Hashem's website, because that's the name of his organization. And they have a wealth of resources, and all their books are available for free and are even in PDF form. But also they have kiruv packages that you can order, which are shipped for free anywhere in America. So that's that. So the last thing that I want to conclude, and this is really important. So the last question is, what advice would I give to somebody becoming religious or to sincere converts? Don't take on so much at a time. If you, let's say, want to become religious, you're not all of a sudden going to become religious by just changing your clothing, wearing a black hat and a black suit. I see many chilonim, secular people that, let's say, half a year to a year ago in the past, they were completely chilonim. And then after that, they completely grow out a beard. They grow out peot. They are wearing black with a black hat and such. The more you try to take on, and the more, let's say, extreme, I wouldn't say extreme, but the more passionate you are in the beginning, and the lack of discipline and the lack of borders and the lack of steadiness, I should say, such people, in my experience, they end up falling off and they drop everything. And in many times they're in a worse place spiritually than they were when they started. So, and for sincere converts, do not look for the quickest conversion. Take your time. Go through the process. We always hear this. I remember hearing a really good quote. It was actually a YouTube short that I saw of a guy. He said that we're always taught that life is short, but actually life is very long. And when he was about 30 years old, he was still 21 years away from having his first book published, even though he had worked so hard on it. And if he were to give advice to a younger person, he would say, don't stress about it. Enjoy the experience. It's not exclusively about the final result. It's about what you learn along the way, the things that you learn on the way, the good and negative experiences that you have on your path to getting there. And when it's ready to happen, it will happen. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu decides that it's ready to happen, it will happen. So the main thing is to be patient. And for people that are becoming religious, take it steady. Do not try to take on so much. Do not become so religious, do not become so extremely sincere and extremely machmir, that you start to look at everybody else as evil, as if you start to look at everybody, the keilah, as evil. So the Gemara in Masechet Rosh Hashanah speaks about this, and we see this a lot in the liberal religious and even in the traditional community, that those that rely on the leniencies of Beit Shammai and the leniencies of Beit Hillel, such a person is considered a rasha, a wicked person, meaning that he keeps continuing to look for leniencies, and he's not actually looking for the truth. He's not looking to get closer to Hashem. He's just looking for the easiest thing to do, which is something that many people will do. It's like, oh, he says yes, he says no, I'll go with the yes with him. Or, the next week that person says yes, oh, I'm going to go with him. Or both of them don't know what they're talking about, I'm going to rule my own way, which unfortunately is something that we see in a lot of modern Orthodox synagogues. In many shiurim, they pass out the source sheet with hundreds of different sources. Rashi says yes, Tosfot says no, the Shulchan Aruch says yes in these circumstances. It's like, okay, what do we hold by? It's like, you can make up your mind. As somebody that is becoming religious or a convert, it immediately kills the Dat Torah. It completely kills your limud Torah for that week, but also it makes you makes them say, I can just pick and choose what I want, like Skittles or like sandwiches in a supermarket. And that's not how Torah is. Now, on the other side, for the people that want to hold all of the hardest, most difficult things, I want to be like, I want to be more of a tzaddik than Moshe Rabbeinu. So those that hold all the stringencies of Beit Shammai and the stringencies of Beit Hillel, what are they, righteous? Not at all. Such a person is considered like a fool who walks blindly in the night. At least somebody that walks with a really weak flashlight or a flashlight with a severely depleted battery. Such a person, it doesn't matter, stringent or lenient. The question is, what is the truth? This is why it is important for a person to follow a posek, to surrender yourself, not only to a posek, but surrender yourself to a rav. Aseh lecha rav, make yourself a rav. It is super, super important, because that rav, even though your earthly father, biological father, was with HaKadosh Baruch Hu's help, brought you into this world, your rav is going to be the one that brings you to Olam Haba, to the world to come. So it's super important to find a Rav to learn from, but it's important to find a Rav that has really good characteristic traits. If you learn with somebody that's not, let's say, not patient or gets angry, or even somebody that let's say is more liberal, like supports LGBT, or is okay with, or even is okay with giving aliyot to people that, let's say, have the opportunity, let's say, live in the neighborhood, but are completely mechalel Shabbat, and they do that by choice, and the Rav knows that. If such a person in that Rav's community gives that person an aliyah, run from your life, because you're not going to learn as much from the Rav, and you're definitely not going to learn from about Yirat Shamayim. There are so many people, you'll hear so many people speak about a Rav, especially if they're secular. They'll say, oh, this Rav is the best. And it's like, how long have you been going to his synagogue? Oh, I've been going to him for 20 years. Okay, and you're still a mechalel Shabbat. You still drive on Shabbat. You still cheat on your taxes. You still, let's say, cheat with your girlfriend, you still have a short temper. Obviously, that Rav is not a good Rav, because that Rav would be that Rav would have been teaching that person. He would have given him rebuke, tochacha, in its proper way, but he also would have taught him the mitzvot. He would treat his kihila like real, like he's a shepherd. But unfortunately, many times the community rabbis of these modern Orthodox synagogues, they can't do anything because they were hired by the synagogue board, and many times the synagogue board themselves, they are not only not religious, but they don't know the first thing about Yirat Shamayim. And it's as the Chida in Morocco, Rav Chaim David Azulai, who is a big gadol. He was considered a gdolado of the Jews of Morocco. He said that Judaism declared bankruptcy when the rabbis stopped owning their synagogues. And this is actually something that I want to do. I want to have my own synagogue. I don't want to be financed by anybody, because I don't want somebody that's, let's say, completely secular, or no Yirat Shamayim, no good midot. I don't want such a person to dictate to me what the synagogue policy is going to be. So yeah, getting back to the point, it is super important to find a Rav that has Yirat Shamayim and has good characteristic traits, because you learn a lot more from a person's characteristic traits than you do from the Torah that they teach you. So life is really good. I continue to learn in yeshiva. I try to find more ways to sanctify Kadosh Baruch Hu's name. It's not always easy. There are times when you will wake up and say, I just don't feel like doing tefillah, or in my case, I don't feel like taking my time during tefillah, because on Shabbat, I take my time when it comes to tefillah. I say my tefillot with the proper intentions, which is super important. Just like saying the right bracha, you have to say the prayers with right intentions. And yeah, so I hope that this video helped some people. I hope that helped religious people, kind of understand the perspective of a sincere convert, why we decided to convert to Judaism. Even though I haven't touched on the discriminations that converts go through, which I'm sure that I will go through those when doing a shiur Torah on halachot or a parasha shiur, but that will eventually come. So until then, I hope you all learn something really well. Learn something. I hope that you take at least one thing out of my conversion story. And if I'm able to inspire somebody to become a better Jew, to become a better version of themselves, then great.